Gods walked in.
Rejoice together.
Well, welcome everybody. Here he goes. Here he is.
All right, y'all. I ran my computer just goes up on me for the first time in God knows how long, and we'll do it on this show. All right, Hanif, do the quick introduction while I make a quick adjustment and switch computers.
All right. Welcome everybody to OnDeck, where we have unfiltered and raw conversations for our community with our community. My name is Hanif Nelson. I'm one of the facilitators on this show, and we've got a special show for you today. Today, we're going to be talking about being elected, electability, and what that means for our community. You know, especially with what we're dealing with right now in this day and age. Well, a lot of the things that we're seeing in politics are things that we tend to be dissatisfied with. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, what can you do? How can you get involved? And if you're going to run for elected office, what do you do to become electable? You know, on with us today, we've got a number of special guests, but one of our regular panelists, Ms. Minnie Jones, is on with us today. And while we're here, you know, one thing I want to say while we wait for D-Moss to get back on is, if you've never thought about running for political office, you probably should pay attention for this show, because you may find after this show that running for political office is not as far-fetched as you think it is. So with that, I want to give it back to D-Moss, who's going to introduce our guest today.
All right. Keep talking. All right, I'm still experiencing some technical difficulties.
All right, so then why don't we start by having Councilor Marcus Williams? Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. Thank you, Hanif. It's a pleasure to be on the call with all of you all, doing great work throughout the country. So it's certainly a pleasure to be having this podcast with you today. My name is Marcus Williams. I am a Springfield City Councilor, currently serving in my third term. I represent Springfield's 5th ward, which is the largest ward in Springfield, which encompasses about 3 or so different neighborhoods. I graduated from Boston College, and then after that came back home to my hometown to serve on different political campaigns, and ended up finding myself running for elected office myself, thinking that I could certainly do the job, having worked for other folks especially, and got elected actually my first time out, which was certainly a blessing. You know, within politics, I guess I can credit me for leading the charge to create the first chief diversity officer within the city of Springfield through my legislation and ordinance. And I also led the charge to regulate mobile food trucks, which is a booming industry in Springfield for the first time after an 8-year stalemate as well. So again, outside of politics, I serve as the donor services manager for Proteus Fund, which is a full service philanthropic organization that brings together like-minded partners to
Seems like a few of us are having technical
Create
difficulties.
Are we all back?
We're back. Yeah, we're back.
So yes, I have my toe or foot in acting as well. I haven't recently been casted and commercials, motion pictures, as well as television shows as well. So I'm kind of just multifaceted in that sense. Probably do it to keep me sane, because politics, especially in this environment, is it's a lot. So and it takes all of us to bring these issues to the forefront. So that folks who are interested in running can certainly hear about the process and get involved ultimately. So again, I just really thank you all for joining, and I look forward to the conversation.
All right. Next up, we have Tiffany Harrison.
Hi all, my name is Tiffany Harrison. I'm really excited to be here. I'm hailing from Round Rock, Texas, which is a suburb of Austin, Texas. And so I'm a couple of different things. I'm an educator, a classroom educator. I've been in the classroom as a high school marketing teacher for almost a decade now, and an entrepreneur, community organizer, a designer, an investor. And my life's passion is racial and educational equity. So I do a couple of different things. I blend the passion for entrepreneurship and equity through an organization called the Radical Equity Fund. And as a part of this fund, we advise and invest in diverse founders and ed tech startups. And then I also work with our community to organize and to advocate for all students, and specifically for Black students, with an organization called Round Rock Black Parents. I actually decided to run for school board after having a really tough time being within the school district as a teacher and as an educator. So there's so few Black educators, just in general in education. And when I became an educator coming from industry, I started to understand why. It was a truly racially violent environment, which is unacceptable. Because if I'm experiencing that as an educator, you can only imagine what our students are experiencing. And so I decided that I was going to run for school board after trying to work with my superintendent and board members to advocate for the needs of all students to be met. I figured as much time as I'm spending advocating, I might as well just be on the board and actually be able to be a decision maker. And so that was the motivation behind my run. It's really rare to have somebody transition directly from the classroom to the school board. My campaign is run by my former and forever students. It's a diverse campaign staff of young ladies, and they are incredible. They have put together some of the best branding, some of the best messaging, and definitely some of the best fundraising for a local school board campaign that I've seen, in addition to community engagement. I'm a 2-time teacher of the year, so you have to imagine if my experience being a Black educator was rough as a 2-time teacher of the year, it's pretty rough out here in these streets. And what I know is that Black kids need us in the suburbs more than ever. We tend to forget about that and forget about them. And so that is what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about high quality education for all students. And I'm happy to be here today.
Tom Shepard, want to introduce yourself?
Yep, I just had to hit the unmute button. So hi, everyone. My name is Tom Shepard. I currently serve as what's called the Community Education Council President's Representative on the New York City Department of Education's Panel for Educational Policy. The Panel for Educational Policy is, by statute, the New York City Board of Education. I am, first of all, a dad to 6 kids. I am a product of New York City Public Schools, a veteran of the United States Navy, a longtime parent leader and advocate, a community organizer. Like, I just wear a ton of hats. My family's in the back now. Daughter's getting her hair braided. My wife is taking care of all of that. So life's good. But for me, what I noticed is just that there weren't a lot of, when you look at decision-making spaces, you just notice that there weren't a lot of parents in them. And you walk into rooms and you are advocating for the things that are important to you. And what you realize is that folks are going to do what they're going to do. And it has very little, many times, to do with, like our positions or our needs as parents. So when you consider the Bronx and the fact that the Bronx, represents the district or the county in the United States of America with the highest amount of economic need. In other words, the poorest people in the country live in the Bronx, and we are not represented in decision-making spaces. That was my motivation to really kind of step into this. And, we can certainly, as this goes on, I'll explain more about what that means, but it is definitely a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Next up, Alderman Vernon Matthews Jr.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vernon R. Matthews Jr. hailing from Waterbury, Connecticut. I'm a two-term alderman for the city, also former Parks Commissioner for the second district, which I represent right now. A proud alum of the Philip Cookman College in Daytona Beach, Florida. Born and raised in Waterbury, saw a need that we needed change within the community, more of an advocate than a politician, someone that is really willing to serve the community. And like Tom said, in order for us to make a difference, we got to be at that table. And I noticed when I ran, I was the only Black male that was running as a Republican, won my seat, but there was only one other Black person that was on the board that sat with me. Now there's three of us that sit on the board, two were appointed and me being elected. And it still doesn't make up the demographic of what the city is and also what the needs of the city for the type of population that we have. Brown and Black make up a majority of the city now of Waterbury, and we're still underfunded, underrepresented, and undervoiced when it comes to anything that needs to be done within the city of Waterbury.
Okay, well, thank you. Did I miss anybody? I don't think I did. So let's just start with this. Tell me how exactly, I know a couple of folks have already given their rationale for running for office, but talk about what really prompted you in terms of running for office. Who did you have to talk to? Did you run it by family? What were your thoughts on the political process before you got involved? Why take this step? We know how dirty, how dragged out it could be. Why take this particular step? Who else to go first?
I'll go first.
All right, since you're up, go for it.
Okay, so I've done this before, and I think the best way for me to explain this is to kind of share it in a quick story. Okay, so about 5 years ago, I went on a job interview for a really exclusive, like rich white private school in the north section of the Bronx, in the Riverdale section of the Bronx, right? And went to the interview, got offered the job, and got a tour of the school. And as I toured the school, I realized that this school had like the best of everything, right? And, I don't make snap decisions in that regard. So I asked if I could have 24 hours to think about it. I'll let them know in the morning. They said, great. So I got in my car and I had to drive over to my kid's school because they were having what's called a school leadership team, right, meeting. And on the drive from this this exclusive private school to my kid's school, I got mad. And I got mad because I saw what $50,000 a year for an education can buy for your kids. And then I noticed that my kid's school didn't have any of those things. And after the school leadership team meeting, I had a conversation with the principal, and we focused the conversation around technology. And I said, well, what can we do to improve access to technology in this school for our kids? And she said, well, I don't know. What do you think? And I was like, well, give me 24 hours to think about it. Right. So I went home that night and I had these two things in my hand. On one hand, I had, an access to an incredible opportunity to go to a private, work at a private school, by extension, have my kids go there. And on the other hand, I had, my kid's school, which in the district represented the school with the highest economic need, like 97% of the students were poor, and didn't have access to any of those things. And so I thought about that, and I made a choice that night. And the choice I made really changed my life. And it was, rather than give my time and my talent away to a school that could hire anybody to do it, let me give my time and my talent and my energy and my love and care to, like schools that need it. And that kind of like set off a chain of events for me. And I realized the more I got into it, the more that like my voice was needed. For example, I noticed that there are marginalized voices within marginalized communities, right? I believe it was the alderman that spoke a minute ago, how there weren't many Black men in these spaces, right? And when we talk about education, typically it is a female-dominated space, and there aren't many Black men at all inside of these spaces. So as I advocated and as I organized around getting things for our children, I realized that my voice as a Black man, as a dad, needed to be in these spaces, and needed to be in these spaces like, standing tall, unapologetic. And that was my main motivation for doing this. And it's the one thing that I share with members of the community that are interested in doing this, right? Like, step into a space, be who you are, and represent those who need you the most. So, I figured that's a great place to start if we're having a conversation around why.
I can go next. So for me, it's been a bit of a long journey. It actually was sparked in me maybe about 4.5 years ago, when I had some students notice some discipline disproportionalities in our school district and in their experience. And it was actually a white student that brought it up. He said, "Ms. Harrison, I'm never where I'm supposed to be. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I never get stopped, though." He's like, "Your class is the only class I have ever stayed in throughout the whole class. And when I'm by myself, I never get stopped. But when I'm with my friends, one of which he was Black and one of which he was Afro-Latino, he was like, we get stopped every time. And not only do we get stopped, but they get accosted. They're treated really roughly. Normally, I get let go and they get kept, and they're not even doing anything." And so I encourage these students that mimicked what I definitely saw as a teacher. I encouraged them to document their experiences. And they did, and they actually turned it into their senior year math project for their advanced quantitative reasoning course, which is like actually a very remedial math course. And so they did all kinds of analysis, and I helped them. We did user interviews and just all kinds of analysis. And I am not statistician at all, but I relearned all those things to work through that with them. And their teacher was out on medical leave, and so they needed additional teacher support. They had a sub, and what they found was highly disproportionate discipline, which, like, it's one thing to know that happens and that's a trend across the US, and it's another thing to see it in your community and see the numbers up close and personal. And being involved in that project, I had been going to board meetings, I had been working with Black parents to advocate, but it really lit a fire in me. And so working with the students, we decided we wanted educators to have additional support and training. And so those students graduated, they stayed engaged. A product of their work was that we started a Black student union. There had only been one in the districts at that time, like 102 year history. And it had only lasted for a matter of months in the 80s because it was just such a racially violent environment. And so we started a Black student union that has been really strong. And we started working on our advocacy. And what really kind of prompted this move for me was being in a meeting with our superintendent as a part of our equity task force, and me sharing that, my superintendent said, this is an open meeting and you can say what you need to say. And so I said that as a Black educator, I don't always feel safe. And especially not when I'm advocating for Black and Brown and other marginalized children. And he got very angry. And his response was, if you don't feel safe, it's your job to make yourself feel safe. And he also said in that room, if I'm not here for all children, then perhaps I should leave. Now, to be honest, I teach mostly white children, right? We only have 9% Black children in my school district. And I know that every child deserves a safe and quality educational experience. And I didn't appreciate the way he spoke to me. And I extended several olive branches. My students that had graduated actually raised money for a training to help support educators on their racial equity journey. And we'd been doing the work. I'd been meeting with board members, and I just realized I was spending probably an additional 30 hours a week advocating and working to educate our school district for free on how to equitably educate all children. And was being blocked at every turn. And so I decided that instead of working against the current, I would become the current, and I would run for school board. Several things happened in my life. I ended a long-term 5-year relationship that I thought would end in marriage. And so I felt like it was time. I'm young, I don't have children, and it's time. I can't say this will always be time for me. I'm sure that my engagement will be heightened when I have children. And I feel like, you know, when I'm talking to parents about why they're not watching the board meetings, well, the board meetings are 7 hours long. Who has time to do that? They're trying to put their kiddos to bed and do the things that they need to do. So I'm at a time in my life where I feel like I got time. And I have time to watch how we're spending money, how we're treating children, how we're treating staff. Another big thing is that we had a principal that was very racist, and it took forever for her to be held accountable. And ultimately, she was not held accountable, and did lots of harm to our students, our Black and brown students, our LGBTQIA+ students. And you know, I decided enough is enough. If we're not going to do what we need to hold accountable to make these schools safe, then I'm going to do it myself. And so that was the guiding force. I'm at a right time in my life, but it is a sacrifice and it is hard. And it's been hard so far. I think we have 16 more days, and I think I can do anything for 16 days, but I'm not going to act like it's not an uphill battle that requires funds of knowledge that we don't always have, that requires resources of time. Time is the biggest currency here that I need, and definitely money as well. So in Round Rock ISD, your school board is an uncompensated volunteer venture. And I mean, these people probably to provide good oversight and advocacy need 20+ hours a week to do this unpaid job.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Tiffany. Marcus.
All right. I certainly agree with Tiffany, but it's certainly been a long road. And initially deciding to run for office, you know, for me, there's certainly been several motivating factors to get me to that point. One of them being just kind of, you know, being in high school and always partaking in programs and organizations that had a political nature, whether it was Massachusetts Boys State or Academic World Quest, that put me in DC to kind of be exposed to politics on a more national level. Those things definitely helped kind of make my own decision. I would say one of the biggest things certainly was working for Elizabeth Warren in her first Senate campaign as a canvasser, where I had the opportunity to actually knock on doors for a candidate and had to kind of sell the story as to why she should be elected over the Republican candidate, you know. And so, again, it was working on her campaign. And then after, I also served as the Franklin and Hampshire County Coordinator for the Dr. Don Berwick for Governor campaign. And if you all don't know who he is, he served as President Obama's chief of Medicare and Medicaid during his tenure. So, you know, again, having the experience of knocking on doors, telling why the progressive candidate was the superior candidate to choose, exposed me to hearing about the different issues and concerns that constituents had. And little did I know that, you know, in maybe a couple of years' time, those constituents would also be mine. In terms of my own representation. So those were the catalysts, I think, certainly that helped make the decision. And I will be the first to say that I also come from a political family. My uncle serves as a state representative And, you know, it's certainly, I've had this discussion with friends and family alike. It's like, you have to learn how to embrace it in certain moments, but also distance yourself from it in certain moments as well, because you want to step out as the individual. You want to be your own person and not grouped with necessarily, you know, someone who comes from your family, just due to, you know, you having your own set of values and different ideals and things of that nature. So it's certainly, for me, that was a balancing act initially. And then just kind of the coordination of the team. So I actually, for my first campaign manager, I selected a good friend who had no political experience. And for some folks, that might be a risk because, you know, from door to door, and kind of like just knowing the issues that are central to a certain ward or part of the city, you know, he might have not known them initially. But for me, the loyalty factor was big. I needed someone who was not going to be a yes man. I needed someone who was going to give it to me straight as it happened in live time and offered words of encouragement, some things that I, you know, sometimes didn't want to hear, to become a better candidate in the process. So for me, that was really crucial. So, you know, Tyrese was great in that way. And he was also a Black man. So it was putting another Black man in the space, again, who was not exposed to politics prior. So yeah, I met with, you know, the team, I met with family in terms of making the decision. And I had my own kind of trepidations. I'll tell you, no lie. I was a 25-year-old guy, you know what I mean? And for me, you know, still going out, hanging out with friends and all the things of that general nature, like that still appealed to me, you know? So in speaking about the sacrifice, that is something, you know, that I had to give up. The campaign, once I decided to run, became my life. It governed how I spoke to people. It governed, you know, my daily activities. After work every day, when I was serving as a grant writer at the time, after work, I was knocking on doors for 3-4 hours straight until dark every single day, knocking on thousands of doors and becoming my own best salesman. Because, you know, it's great for folks to knock on doors for you to sell your story, but I think you can sell it the best yourself. So it was important for me to be out on the ground, doing that grassroots work to really be in touch with folks that I would be blessed to serve some months later. So again, it was a grueling process. You know, I probably lost like 15 pounds, which was great because I was eating too much food. I will tell you that at the time. So, you know, I didn't have that as necessarily a complaint, but you know, I actually I still have the pair of soles of shoes that are just raw, like just kind of to the ground because of how much walking I was doing. And, you know, it was just, again, it was a great process and learning about myself, learning about my community, especially, and also just, you know, learning about the different facets of things that my friends could do that I didn't know they had, that they honestly could possess. And we took it from there and it hit the ground running. And yeah, like, you know, we made it to election day. You know, I had folks who already elected representatives coming out against me. I remember an ad that was run in the Republican newspaper with 5 elected officials endorsing my opponent because he was the incumbent. So, you know, that gave me more motivation. And I will tell you, fear for me was probably the biggest motivating factor, fear of losing. And that's why I worked so hard to win that campaign and to win it convincingly.
All right. Thank you, Marcus. Next up, let's see. Vernon, you're up.
All right. So, like everybody else said, it is you do time away from your family.
Vern, can I ask you to speak up just a little bit louder?
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yeah.
What I found that being named after my father being involved in politics for several years, everybody, when I would go out and speak, the first thing they'd be like, "Oh, you're not Vernon Matthews." I'm like, "Yes, I am." And so I had to like move myself away from him, but do a lot of talking with him to find out what I really needed to do to advocate for people, because I started my venture in politics as a commissioner, and I was the only person of color that was on the parks board, and they also gave me what would be considered the ghetto parks, if you were looking at the area where I was at. And one of the things that my dad kept telling me is like, in order for you to advocate for your people, you need to get out there and speak your voice, but don't just let this part be your thing. If you know that you need to fight more for your community, fight for your community as an elected official. Sat down, talked to my wife, my kids, my mother, my father, and asked them, was like, is this the right move for me? Should I go ahead and do this? Being around it I'm 48 years old, so I've pretty much been around politics all my life, and knowing the ups and downs, the crying, the excitement of winning, the excitement of losing, the putting your name out there and having people talk about you just for the simple fact that you are willing to put your name out to do something better for your community and look for the negative with stuff that you've done instead of the positive things. You have to have tough skin. So me knowing what was going on within the community, I just grasped everything that was going on, listened to my constituents, and found out that there was a base for me and that I could make a difference. One, I am the only Republican, once again, on this panel, but I don't see myself as a Republican. I see myself as an advocate for the people that just happens to sit on the Republican ticket. I fight just like everyone else fights on this panel for equality. My biggest thing right now is equality for women in the city of Waterbury, and also on the state level. It's sad to say that they're underpaid. They are the ones that are actually getting bumped away from positions when they have good positions within state or city areas. So they really need someone that's going to advocate for them. And not only that, my biggest fear that I have is the fact that we lose our Black men and Black women in politics because of the fact that no one is afraid. They're afraid to put themselves out there, but they're also afraid of what friends and family may say. You're not doing it for being liked. You're doing it to be respected and show accountability for what you're putting yourself out there for.
Okay. All right. Thank you, people. Hanif, I know you had a question based on a quote that Tiffany made.
Yeah, Tiffany said, I decided that instead of working against the current, I would become the current. And I found that to be a really interesting statement on way of putting it. And this question is for all of our guest panelists this week. Did you find that as Tiffany said, becoming the current, that it was difficult for you to, in a sense, sacrifice part of your life in order to go for what you feel is like a greater purpose? Because I think one of the things that the alderman was getting at just now was when you all talking about your motivation to run, one of the things that I heard in different ways from all of you is there was a lot of sacrifice of not necessarily who you are, but some of the things that you do and some of the ways that you're there for your family. So in becoming part of this political current, did you find that the sacrifice, that some people may be turned off because the sacrifice is greater than someone willing to pay for it?
I'd like to jump on it first. Yes, it is. When you think of being out there and putting your name out there, you're sacrificing yourself, you're sacrificing your family, but you're also to the point where a lot of people think that, all right, I'm gonna put my name out there, I'm gonna run for office, we're gonna raise all this money, we're gonna do all these great things, like the counselor from Springfield said, you have to sometimes think outside the box and grab somebody that really has your back. I've had campaign managers that were in politics, and I've had a wife, and then I have my best friend run. And those were my two most successful campaigns because I had people that were behind me that knew exactly what I wanted, how they wanted me to portray myself, and how I needed to be in the public eye. But when I had the stat person that was strictly into politics, it was a facade. It was me. I couldn't be that phony person of going out there and knowing that I'm acting like you. I'm not being myself. I need to go out. If it's a issue, I need to know the issue and know how to speak upon that issue, not what you tell me to say, because it's the safe way. And I find a lot of times in politics, you do have people that want you to play it safe, and you need to have panels like this where you can be raw and you can pretty much say what's on your mind, because only way the four of us are going to learn, or anybody else is going to learn how to deal with politics and what the trials and tribulations of politics is to actually have these type of conversations. And sometimes you may have to step on somebody's toes, you may have to hurt their feelings, but it's not hurting their feelings, it's making them a tougher skinned person. So when they go out there to expose themselves, they're not at the point where it's like, holy crap, I did this and now everybody hates me. I didn't get in it to be liked. I didn't get in this to be loved. I didn't get in this to do anything but be an advocate and fight for my community. And that's where I'm going to go out. That's where I'm going to be. And when I retire from politics, that's what everybody's going to know me as a public servant. I refuse to be that person where it can pretty much can say be bought and do what the establishment wants. Because the establishment has already been in contact and in control, just like in Texas. You control everything, and when you try to control what's going on, everybody loses the narrative, and you really don't have a person that's speaking for you because everybody's speaking the exact same way. Sometimes you got to think outside the box and say, you know, the hell with this. This is what the community wants. This is what we need to do.
Okay. Anybody else want to take a stab at Hanif's question?
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead, Tiffany. Ladies first. Go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. I have to say, life is a matter of life or death for Black people in the U.S. I mean, this is called being Black in America. And so if I know that my quality of life is going to be threatened anyway because I'm Black, why would I not be willing to sacrifice, especially if I'm in a position to do so? I've been able to leverage some of the privilege that I do have to be able to make this run. Like I said, I'm childless right now. I mean, I do hope to have a family one day. I have lots of education. I have an MBA. And I have a strong work history and some level of financial privilege. So why would I not do that when I know that it doesn't matter about all those things? I will face some levels of trauma and oppression as a Black woman in the US. And so I just feel like it is not just my sacrifice, but it is my duty. And like I said, for me, I had been making this sacrifice anyway, advocating and spending my time at these board meetings and spending my time trying to educate school board members that in no way, shape, or form represent our community, especially a Black community. And so it is a tremendous sacrifice. And one thing that I really appreciated about the title of this session is that, you know, you all said it's about elected officials, but also electability. And there's a lot of conversation about if I can show up as my full self and my full humanity and still be elected. Like, can I say that I'm looking at these numbers, I'm looking at a school district that apparently does well in educating all children, but we're underserving Black and brown children and special education children. And can I tell the truth about that and get elected? And if I always have to default to electability, which is the current, will we ever be able to solve those problems that exist? Will we be able to solve the institutional ills that exist in our society and education and in every single industry and organization? And so that's why I said I want to become the current, because I think that if we are just part of the process as it stands, you know, the system that we need to talk about, especially when we're talking about race and racism, we can talk about individual people. They're individually problematic people. But what we know is that this is a problematic system that was built to create and maintain these outcomes. And as long as we allow that system to operate without disruption, we will always have the same outcomes. And so, yeah, it's a sacrifice, but I feel like we're going to sacrifice one way or the other. And so it's time to step up. And it's time to work as a community to figure out who can step up. My community has come together and said, okay, Tiffany's got this. And I've said, I have this for several reasons. So people that can't run right now for various reasons, they're wearing my t-shirt and block walking and dropping lit, you know, contactless lit drop, and their children are writing postcards, and, you know, they're putting the team on their back in a different way. And that is a beautiful thing about some beloved community that we have here.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Tiffany, because you said something a moment ago when we were talking about like the current, right? And we're talking about systems that oppress, right? In New York City, New York City is kind of a weird animal, right? Where the mayor controls the school system, and he controls the school system by appointing 2/3 of the school board members, right? So in New York City, you have, right now it's 15. It was 13 members, and the mayor appointed like 8 of them. The borough presidents appointed like 1 each, and then you had like the school's chancellor, and that's the New York City School Board, right? And so parents, we looked at that and we said, no, if we're going to, we need a voice in this, right? And so we went to Albany and advocated for, like parent membership on the New York City School Board, right? And once we were able to do that, so sometimes you actually have to redirect and kind of create your own current, right? Because the problem with the current is like the current is designed to oppress us, right? It's designed to keep us silent. It's designed to keep us out of it. And sometimes I'd rather just be that tree right in the middle of the current and have the current go around me, or like, or maybe be that dam that just kind of blocks everything up. And, but anyway, the point of it was, in my case, once we were able to get the New York City, system redesigned a little bit to allow for parent voice, we're now looking at what we can do to get more parent voice. And so I wanted to add to that, to what you were saying, because when we I think a lot of times, it's like current in what context, right? And I am, to me, disruption means like a system or a current doesn't work, right? It's flowing, it's taking everybody in the wrong direction. And, me swimming against the current means that I don't agree with the direction. So rather than become the current going in the same direction that everyone else is going in, right? Like I'm willing to just block it all up. And like, if it means just blocking it and doing something different, right, then that's what I'm willing to do. And we've had this conversation. Yeah, go ahead, Daryl.
As a member of the citywide, we're talking New York City, one of the largest cities in the world.
The largest.
Right. So as a member of that board, how do you separate yourself from being the current? Because the minute you take office, you're now the man. You become a part of that establishment. So
yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. Right. So the cool thing about my seat is because I'm not appointed by the mayor and I'm not appointed by one of the borough presidents, I don't answer to them. Right. And, there are several examples of recent votes on the school board. One of them was around pre-K and charter schools. Right. So what's happening is you have the charter industry now that's moving into early childhood education in the same way that they did K through 12 education. And a vote that came up was for us to fund some of these pre-K programs. And one of the problems was that charter school funding, right, is paid for with public school money. So these schools were basically funded already. And what was happening was when COVID started, some of these schools applied for PPP, or the Federal Payroll Protection Program funding, to cover their payrolls when they didn't have to, because their payrolls were already guaranteed, right? So for me, it just appeared to be double dipping. And so I have a conversation like, what's that about? Right. And then when you don't get an answer, it now comes up for a vote. Right. Well, the mayor wants his members to vote in favor of funding those schools. Right. And if you vote against it because you're appointed, you could be removed. Guess what? I don't have that constraint. So I could walk in and be like, this foul, I'm not doing it. No. And there's nothing you can do about it. Right. And that's exactly what I did.
So basically, as long as you stand your ground and you do what you feel is in the best interest of the community you serve, then you're okay.
That's right. And my term is for 2 years.
let me slide over to Marcus real quick, because Marcus did something in Springfield that I thought was interesting as well. As you talk about, Marcus, talk about your battle to get the chief diversity officer in the city of Springfield at a time when they were showing you that we had the numbers in terms of minorities. Talked about we had a diversity and inclusion officer already. Talk about that fight, because you went up against just about all of City Hall on that one. Talk about that a little bit in terms of being an elected official, a city leader, but at the same time going against the city.
Yeah. Oh boy, was that a stressor? I will say though, Daryl, just before I dive into that a little bit, you know, I'm a big believer in, you know, with some power also comes some great responsibility. And I can just remember, you know, through the process of running for office and then, you know, being elected and now serving, one of the prayers I always had, because I am a praying man, is for God to use me as a vessel for other people. And nothing really excites me more than when a young African-American girl or boy or a brown, black, you know, boy or girl comes to me and says, how do I get involved in the political process? I want my voice to be heard. That for me is, I can retire today and just know that, you know, those thoughts and those questions were instilled in someone else. Because you know, I'm of the belief also that I'm not going to be a politician forever. God might have other plans for me. He might be laughing right now, but for me, I don't see myself being a career politician. So, you know, and becoming the youngest person of color elected in Springfield, I would be happy if someone took that over and actually, you know, made history themselves. Who, you know, of course, was an up and comer. So I just wanted to kind of give that insight as well, that, you know, for me, it's all about inspiring the younger generation to run for office, because a lot of the old heads you see today, I don't consider myself an old head, but a lot of people in office who have been in office for 20, 30 years, they're also on their way out. You know, so who's going to replace them? Who's going to keep fighting for the issues that we fought for? Are we still going to have a majority minority city council as we do now, that can keep pushing the envelope? So that's important for me. But diving into the Chief Diversity Officer Ordinance, you know, I filed that piece of legislation because I really wanted the representation in Springfield city jobs to be there. I wanted folks of the protected classes, such as, you know, folks that look like us, veterans, people within the LGBTQ community, to have representation in City Hall. Because when you walk the halls, you just don't see it, especially with those that are department heads, which is also critical for me. So, you know, in introducing that fight, it was a long road. You know, you have to kind of build public consensus, you know, in terms of doing editorials, opinion pieces, and why a CDO officer was definitely needed within the city. When you look at our large corporations in Springfield, such as a Mass Mutual, a Bay State Medical Center, which is our largest hospital here, you see that they have these positions on their files. So why doesn't the city of Springfield also have that in terms of us serving as a model for those type of businesses and corporations that come into town and that have been in town for years? So yes, it was certainly a fight. It was a fight to build consensus amongst my own colleagues, for them to understand the numbers. It was a numbers game. You know, the mayor and I had a lot of ongoing conversation and disagreement with what success looked like as it relates to the composition of Black and brown jobs within the city of Springfield. I think a city government should be representative of the people that it is serving. And that is why I wanted to push for the position. The numbers as they were did not that narrative. And DMOS, I think you can appreciate controlling the narrative. When we talk about controlling the narrative, well, we needed a point person there who shared those beliefs and who had the authority and responsibility to make sure that more folks of color, especially, were hired to municipal jobs. So, so we get into the process of talking about the numbers, again, trying to build consensus. And this is when you're trying to file legislation, I'm sure, as you all know, you know, you have to really stick to speaking and updating your colleagues on the work you're doing as you're doing it, so that, you know, they don't become nimble to the idea that this is not needed or what have you. So it was certainly a lot of due diligence on my part, a lot of communication on my part between also the mayor's office. And again, he was very resistant to the idea. I clashed also with the chief of staff, who, felt that, it was their responsibility and their authority to make this position a reality. Well, if that's the stance, then it should have already been done. So as an elected member of office for the city of Springfield, it's my job to make sure that, again, through my writing ability and I guess legislative power to pen that to paper and to make it a reality and to build the consensus around it for it to come to fruition. So yeah, fought battle. And what's so crazy is that the vote actually for the implementation of the ordinance failed. But for me, and this was a very big learning moment for myself, because I'm thinking, oh, wow, like, geez, like my ordinance, all the work that I've done kind of just went through the window. So where do I go from here? So a week later, believe it or not, the mayor has a press conference and introduces the creation of a chief diversity officer and pretty much uses the tenets of my ordinance as to create the job description for this potential employee. So I realized that it's not always about how you get something through. Implementation is what matters most. And in that way it was certainly implemented. Yes.
So it kind of goes back to what Tiffany is saying in terms of getting into the current, becoming the current.
Yes.
You may not have made the, had the direct impact, but because you changed the direction of the current, as Tom had alluded to, it happened, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Sure. Yes.
Cool. Minnie, anything to add?
Well, politics really isn't my forte. It's just not my lane. And what some other people, young people might be wondering, is there a bag involved? Am I going to be able to feed my family? Am I still going to have to, have a job, a part-time job and a hustle? Do I have to completely do away with my ratchet lifestyle? Not to say that my lifestyle is ratchet, but I like to partake in some ratchetness every now and then. I remember Counselor Williams talking about, going out, to the club and the stuff that, a lot of 25-year-olds want to do. Am I going to be chastised for, a heated debate game at the family reunion, or, you know what I mean? Like, these are the things that I think about and I wonder about. Primarily, though, is there a bag involved? Because I just want to get to the bag. I feel like as a people, we got 99 problems and money will solve at least 80 of them, and that's being conservative. So I like to get to the bag. So how can is there a bag involved? Am I going to have to completely renounce, the things that I like to do to have fun? Am I going to have to just recreate myself? And if I'm not willing to do that, how can I be of assistance? People who aren't interested in voting, typically, if they just don't know, what to do, how to get started. Some people don't know where they would go to vote. I don't even know who's running for office most of the time until I see them hanging out by the light and stuff, passing out Twizzlers and whatnot. So those are just some things that I wonder about when it comes to D-Moss is laughing at me. But I'm so serious. These are the things that come to my mind.
You're absolutely, I'm laughing because you're absolutely not alone. In a slow election season, nobody knows who's running. This time you have no idea there's an election happening. For the incumbent, it's to his advantage to not promote anything. For the guy who wants to challenge an incumbent, he needs to make sure that everybody knows about that. So let me ask all of our guests. There are a lot of people. I guess Friday night we had another show and someone said that voting isn't worth the time or the effort. Why is voting so important? Marcus, you talked about that chief diversity officer, and that's something that we'll always remember you for because that opens up doors. As Minnie talks about the bag, we have quite a few people who have access to that bag because we have a chief diversity officer, or they should now have access. So talk about why voting is important and how you can change the quality of somebody's life from the seats that you sit in. Go ahead, Tom. I see your hand up.
Yeah, people ask me that all the time, and my response is really simple. 66,000 votes in 4 states.
Okay.
Right? We have 66,000 votes in 4 states that got us all the drama we've been dealing with for the last 4 years. And, if you want it, there's a little sticker that hangs up in my car, and it says, if you change nothing, nothing will change. And, if you don't vote, you're basically not changing anything. And if you're not changing anything, you can't expect any change as a result. And, so I tell people, personally speaking, whether you are a Republican or Democrat doesn't matter. It's like when you had so many people decided they were not going to vote in the last presidential election, right? Because they didn't believe in either candidate, right? The problem is everything that happened since. And, if you need a better example, like to me, there's no better example of what happens when you don't vote, right? Okay. Like if you want your community to be different, if you want your, politics is local for the most part. And if you don't vote, you can't complain about the way that things are. That I just see it that way.
Okay, cool. Hanif, you're up.
Another common thread that I'm hearing with all of you, and that I don't think it's talked about enough when it comes to politics, whether you're in office or running for office, is the team that you've built, whether it's to help get you there or to help keep you in there or to help sustain you while you're there. So for the people that are watching that don't understand that aspect of what it means to be in politics, can you tell us what it meant for you to build the team and how that team has been central either to your success from going from candidate to incumbent, or how it's propelling your success to becoming, whichever position you're running for?
I'll answer both questions because I'd like to expound on Minnie's question. I think it's really important and I don't want to skip over that. I've been building my team all along. I just didn't realize it. So as someone who organizes a community and who shows up in a lot of places that people don't think a Black woman should be, that's my team. And people don't really realize that, and I've infiltrated spaces that that people didn't think I was infiltrating. And I didn't know I was infiltrating them. All I knew is that I wanted to make my community better. So I was going to show up where I could show up and show out because I wanted to take up space and I knew I belonged there. And I knew if I took up space on my Chamber's Entrepreneurship Council, what I'm telling another little Black girl is that she can take up space as well, in a space like that. And so I think for me, and I think what makes good candidates, and I don't know, we'll see in 16 days if it's been successful, is people that are already connected to their community and have the heartbeat of their community. And my team is full of people who, like I said, are my forever students. So I have 4 staff members that are my forever students, but then my consultants are genius Black and brown women who have run campaigns before. So they told me before I even filed, you're going to experience some abuse because you're a Black woman and because you're going to be messing with their bag. People don't realize your school board, our budget is $500 million. And so some of these bags that we're seeing are going from people who are passing contracts on to their friends that are not the lowest bidders or not the best bidders for buildings and projects and real estate. And so they have a bag. In terms of a bag for myself, one thing that I am really working to undo in myself that's a part of white supremacy culture is either or thinking, right? That gets us stuck. That gets us stuck when we think about Democrat versus Republican and a whole lot of things. And so I'm working to uproot that in my life and carry on with a more yes and. And so I think that everybody plays a role in the change ecosystem. So if your role is to have the heartbeat of the community and be ratchet, but still know what your community needs, that's your role. And that means I need to be connected to people that are in that within so that we can build the best community. That's not, and for me, I'm going to have to make my own badge for my school board because it's a volunteer position. So I'm literally having to figure out how I'm going to make money because I will have to resign my job as a teacher. But guess what? I'm an entrepreneur. So that means I'm positioned to do that. Are there bags in politics? Yeah. Are most of those corrupt bags? Yeah. So I don't want any part of that. But that's what I mean. So like Minnie, if you don't want to do the journey that I'm doing, it doesn't mean your journey is less valid. I think your journey is wonderful, but it does mean that I need help from Minnie, in my community. And I think that it's time that we look at our local elected officials because, like I said, $500 million. And guess what, y'all? That's our tax dollars at work. So whether we want to be in politics or care about politics at all, that's our money they're spending. So it behooves us to just be engaged locally. I'm thinking about Ice Cube, and I don't know if y'all already talked about that, and just like the drama surrounding Ice Cube. And, where he says that neither party cares about us, I believe that's true. And it is really important to look at the receipts of what parties are doing for us. And I can tell you, there's one that's doing nothing that met with him that said that they would implement a plan. I'm like, if you look at the receipts, they ain't implemented nothing before. So why are they going to implement anything moving forward? But I think that we can't just look to that office when we're talking about voting. We need to look locally because this local voting is greatly impacting our quality of life. Not just our quality of life, but let's talk about our kids too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to go back to something for all the folks out there who really aren't, again, people still challenge the vote. How much success have you had, or what have you done in the past for those who have already been elected? Vern, I'm very familiar with Waterbury. I know when you go up towards the hill, Walnut Street, all that area, these are people who historically have not voted in high numbers. What have you done to get these folks to get out and vote? How do you keep that support happening for your district?
Well, it's unique because I do have a team that consists of myself and about 4 or 5 people that live in the Wild Long Hill area. And we try to get out as much as possible to do cleanups, different things like that, to show people that, hey, he's not only elected, but he's still concerned about the community. So if they see you doing the work within the area, they're going to be saying, okay, well, he showed up, so let me just go ahead and vote for him. And that's what I was saying about the accountability. When you are able to go and speak to them and kind of entice them to get out to vote, to make sure that they know that their vote counts, because we always hear, oh, my vote doesn't count. If I go, who cares if I vote or not, because it's not going to be the person that I want. But like you said, 66,000 made or broke the last time around. So what we have to do is we have to show our people that yes, your vote does count. There were people that were killed. There were people that were shot. There were places that were burned because of the fact that they didn't want you to exercise your right to vote. And for my area, which is predominantly brown and black skin district, and probably the poorest district in the city of Waterbury, these people need to have someone that's there to teach them that the importance of the vote, who you need to be researching and want to have represent you rather in Hartford or downtown Waterbury, because if they can't speak for you, then who else is going to speak for you? A lot of our people are also scared because they're afraid if they go out and vote, they'll lose services or whatever, because Daryl knows Waterbury is a political town. And if you're connected with somebody and they know that you voted against them, now your organization won't get funding, or someone that that is running an organization won't get funding to punish you and to punish them. So we have to make our people feel safe in their vote and let them know that their vote counts, because in order for you to move forward and to be electable, is you have to gain trust from your public. And a lot of times we don't see it, and especially in that area, don't see it because they've had so many people come in and make promises to them and then withhold the promise, or They just basically said, all right, we gave you a fish dinner and now you can go on. And for many saying about the bag or whatever, I think I'm probably the poorest person on here that gets paid anything from being an elected official. I actually get $333 a month in a stipend to work upwards to possibly 20 hours a day working on city problems, along with my regular job with the state of Connecticut.
Well, you 330 better than me. No, seriously, and think about this, for example, right? Like New York City School Board, right? The largest school system in the country, 1.1 million kids, operating budget of $34 billion, right? And then by extension, I sit as a trustee of the Board of Education Retirement System, which is another $7 billion pension and retirement fund. I don't get a dime. And with fiduciary responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So, the thing is, and I think Tiffany spoke to it a few minutes ago, right? It's, I'm an entrepreneur also. And the thing is, we try to build our lives in such a way where we can support ourselves while we're trying to support our communities, right? And, there's a part of me that in all of this, you have people that see what it is that I do. They're like, we got Tom, he's on the school board, he's really trying hard for us, but he also runs his own business, right? And maybe I can support him by supporting his business, right? So if I support his business, it allows him to continue to serve us, right? And not that one depends on the other or it creates any kind of ethical violations or anything, but it's really like folks supporting each other, right? And you see it play out all the time in white communities where if they have the means, they can do these things without any kind of problem. But then otherwise, you have folks that come out and support them in what it is they're doing so that they can support their communities, right? So, is it about the money? In many ways for us, it is, but at the same time, it's not, right? For me, it's not about whether or not I collect a paycheck from it. It's about making sure that, my kids, or not even my kids now, my grandkids, right? My grandkids can, function in a school system that did, better for them than it did their parents, or better for them than it did for me, right? And, I said it in the chat a few minutes ago, like, I don't look at this like it's a sprint or marathon, right? And this is actually speaking to what Councilor Williams said a minute ago. I look at this as kind of a relay race, right? Like, I'm going to run my part, and I'm going to run my part as hard and as fast as I can, right? And as faithfully as I can, and do everything I can. And then I'm going to take that baton and I'm going to pass it off to the next person and let the next person, leave their mark and leave their legacy. So, I did kind of want to add that.
Okay. I have something I want to, ask you, Tom, as someone that is a little familiar with some of the things with New York City, because I was born there, I was raised in New York. How does a school system with a $34 billion budget have sections of its network severely underfunded?
Okay. So first of all, if you consider what 1.1 million kids means, right? That's a lot of people. So 1.1 million people or students, right, represents as a population the 9th largest city in America, right? So 1.1 million New York City public school students represents the 9th largest city in the country by population. So if you go to the 9th largest city in the country, San Jose, and you look at their budget, right? Their budget should be somewhere around, I think, would be somewhere around $35 billion, right? And, so when you look at the services that type of money pays for, right? So it doesn't just pay for gen ed education. It pays for transportation. It pays for food. It pays for special education. It pays for a whole host of things. And, to be underfunded means that, if you consider, for example, in New York, they have this thing called fair student funding. And basically it's what it would cost to educate one child, right? And, then that number is weighted depending on needs. So, does a child have special needs? Are they poor? All sorts of things. Then they weight that. And then that's applied to the student at a particular school. When that's not being fully funded, right? So instead of paying, $1, you're paying 90 cents, right? Then by default, what you end up with is a quality of education that's diminished just because you're not putting all the resource by your own formula into a system. Go ahead. Did I miss something? But by default, the problem here is when you look at funding, right? Historically, school funding has been largely based on property taxes, right? And what happens is you have affluent districts that pay more in property tax, so their schools get more. And then you have areas like in the Bronx where home ownership is relatively low because everybody lives in apartment buildings, right? And then you have public housing that, is disproportionately represented in the Bronx, where you don't have the same property tax base. So what happens? Those schools generally tend to be underfunded, right? And these formulas, these fair student funding formulas were put into place to sort of compensate for that, right? So not taking from one to pay the other, but making sure that across the board, every child's education is funded fairly. The problem here is it always ends up being a zero-sum game, right? So if I'm going to give children in poor neighborhoods more funding because they've been historically underfunded, then that funding comes from someplace else. And, the problem with that is then the system pushes back, right? So then, white people, affluent white folks, push back and say, well, no, you're not going to take from my school to give to the poor school in the Bronx, right? And you had this power struggle that continuously plays out. And then when we're not represented in those spaces, right, what ends up happening is that, it perpetuates and our schools get even more underfunded while their schools get even more funded, right? And that's really what it is. It's not that every school is underfunded. It's our schools are underfunded.
Which is something that happens everywhere. If you look at a small city like Springfield, we see some schools getting funded more than other schools. We look at the suburban districts where our displaced tax base. Although the vast majority of those folks live in Springfield, their school districts are highly funded, ours are underfunded. We had high schools that had no books. So I get where you're coming from, Tom. I do have a question with all of our elected officials and candidates. Talk about electability. For anyone who's watching who may be interested in running for a political office, talk about electability. What does that look like? Like Tiffany, when your students decided that you'd make the perfect candidate, what made them believe that you were electable? Talk about electability and how a person needs to position themselves if they plan on running for office.
Well, my electability is still to be determined. Let's see if I get elected. It's looking strong. But thank you. I believe it. It's looking strong. It's looking good. But I think that I spoke before. I have infiltrated places where people probably don't think I belong or even know that I'm there. I can't tell you how many times I've popped up in some capacity, especially in dealing with my superintendent, that they didn't realize I was a part of. And so I think this is an interesting conversation because I think so many times electability falls into respectability. Like I've had people tell me, like, you're not going to get elected if you talk about race. And I'm like, but one of the foremost things we need to talk about is race. So like, do you really not want to solve the problems with institutional racism that we have? And the answer is no, probably not. And so I'm still learning. I also think I didn't wait for people to tell me that I was electable. I decided myself that I'm electable. I know that I know what my community needs. And so, boom, I'm electable. I'm running. And So yeah, maybe that's not a really good answer. Obviously, me deciding that I'm electable has been validated by people in my community, because I think that can go the other way as well. I think a lot of times people might have personal interests in political office, and they're not close to the heartbeat of their community or the need. They don't know the data. They don't know the people that they want to represent, and that's not okay, and that's not productive. But I think it has a mix of like self-determination of, this is something that I want to do, and I know this is a way I can serve my community and the community needs it, and that community support and advocacy saying, you are the person we want to represent us.
Okay, that's good stuff. Marcus, same question.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I certainly appreciate it. I mean, I certainly believe that electability certainly has something to do with the respectability, but I also believe that one thing that is under discussed is likability as well. And you often see some of the politicians that probably have agendas that are not in alignment with our own being electable. And some folks are wondering why it doesn't serve the greater interest of, the community at large, especially your community. But a lot of it is likability. It's being your true authentic self when you are opening, knocking on a door and someone's opening the door for you. I think, with that comes certain elements. So for me, when I was running, the personal touch was crucial, I think, in my campaign, especially because it's so localized. And the personal touch for me means me leaving a note if someone's not at the door saying, I came, I stopped by, it'd be great to get in touch with you again. That I think went a long way. I think, doing, for example, of course, standouts, people, debate all the time whether they're truly effective. But again, in a local race, I think they are. When folks are seeing that you're working and trying to earn a vote, you're showing up to represent yourself, I think that matters as well. I think it's also when you are not sure of an answer, saying and being true, I don't know. And I will circle back with you once I find the answer, because one thing that I find with a lot of folks in the political arena is that they can BS an answer really well. But I think people respect more you being human and saying, I don't know. I have to do some research on the topic. I appreciate you raising it, and I will circle back with you on my thoughts around the issue and how we, find a resolution. So I think that's the part of it. Likability is huge. I think also when you look at Ward 5 that I represent, it's composed of single family homes. It's composed of, it has a pretty decent elderly population. It's composed of young and older families. And there's really not a lot of rental market within the district itself. So it's understanding those different elements and appealing to all of them. You know what I mean? As a young elected official, or, at the time a candidate. So again, it's kind of just knowing your bases. Being likable is certainly huge, I think. And then I think, of course, if you're or if you're unsure of how to approach a situation, being honest and genuine in saying that your unfamiliarity with the topic and come and circling back. So for me, I think that went a long way. Again, it was more of a local race that's not necessarily, the case with every, person running for office, where they're trying to represent. But for me, I think that certainly worked.
Okay. All right.
If I could add to that, if you don't mind, I asked myself two questions while this was going on, and I always say, first of all, electability based on whose standard, right? Like, the deal with being unapologetic in this is the fact that I don't really care about what your standard for electability is, right? I heard Tiffany say, like, if I believe that I'm electable, then I have to go out and make that case for others for others. And, so, in my experience of going into the system, it didn't matter to me. It didn't matter to me that whether or not I was, electable, right? It was, the model that I live by. And that is basically that, people follow why I do things, right? Like the motivation, why means everything. And if I can go out and make a case for why, like, why would I be the one that's best able to represent you, right? Then people will either go with that or not. And, like, I have to circle back around to that a lot, because I think we often get caught up in this kind of conversation, like what makes a person electable, whether or not they're likable. First of all, I don't care if anybody likes me, right? To me, it's not really about that. It's not even like electability based on whose standard, right? Is it based on, the standard of the system that oppresses me, right? Or is it, electability based on what I'm able to bring? So, I think as we have those conversations, we have to kind of be clear in that distinction.
Well, Tom, I think a lot of it has to do with who's voting for you, depending on the type of district you live in. What does it look like? If you had a preference for a candidate, what type of candidate would you look for? I think anyone interested in the political process or the electoral process should have some general understanding of what electability looks like, or as Marcus alluded to, even likability. I don't think I'd have a difficult time running in the neighborhood that I live in, given the stance that I take on issues. Am I electable in Ward 8 in the city of Springfield? It's not a huge Black district. So I think we have to talk about that. I think the goal of this broadcast and other conversations is to get more Black people heavily involved in the political process, putting them in positions to be voted for. So I think it's a conversation that has to be had. And in terms of the standards, I think the beautiful part about this is being in a position where we can determine what those standards are for ourselves.
Well, if I could push back just a little bit, right? Because I think back to 2008, and I think about a Black man named Barack Obama. I hear this awful like buzzing sound, but I think about a young Black man named Barack Obama that was running for president of the United States, right? And he had to convince white people like to elect him, right? Like, and so what made him electable? And the thing was, I think it was his appeal, like what he was able to bring. And it didn't matter. Like in that case, there were people that didn't vote for him because he was Black, right? Just like there were people that did vote for him because he was Black. I think it transcends that. Like, I really do think that it's electability based on whose standard, right? Like he walked in and he said that,
so, Tom,
I can do this.
Real quick. What if he came in? Tiffany alluded to the conversation around race. Barack avoided that question in a lot of occurrences. So what if he came in with an agenda to change the quality of life for Black folks? What if he said he was going to question the policies, make governmental changes, push for governmental changes that would heavily impact Black people? Do you still think he would have got those votes?
I don't know. Maybe not. Right. I don't speak for other people. I'm just thinking, one of the big problems in this conversation is, when we are talking about things like electability, when we're talking about all of these things in a context of a system that oppresses us. And, I'm willing to step outside of that and say, well, maybe we need to redefine all of it. Right. And I mean, that's how I think.
But Tom, one thing I want to say about that is that I think, for your stance and for where you are, that is a stance that you have a luxury of taking that a lot of other people don't. And I think one of the things that Dee's trying to allude to with that is that, for those that don't have the luxury of being able to take that stance, what can they possibly do to get themselves in a position where they are considered electable by those that are casting their votes? I mean, I don't have any disagreement with what you're saying, but I think if anything we learned from the last presidential election, not even just about the 66,000 votes that separated what we have from what we could have had, but also how he got those 66,000 votes, how he appealed to people. And some of those 66,000 votes were people that previously voted for Barack Obama. So how he appealed to those people to get those 66,000 votes he needed was just as important. I mean, I think everyone on this panel, we could debate his qualifications all we want, but he said some things that got him into that office. And everyone is not in a situation where, and this is my perspective, everyone's not in a situation like what Dean said about his district, where they can be truly unapologetic and get themselves in office. And I think that's where we're trying to kind of like look at this discussion for those people who don't have that luxury because they're not in a district that will, want to cooperate with that.
I think that I'm going to break in here. I'm a Kanye, whoever was up next, real quick. I think that it has to do with interest convergence, and I think that that's part of coalition building. Is because just because you think you're the person that needs to be put up doesn't mean that you are the person that needs to be put up. If you have a coalition and if you're working in community, y'all are going to figure out who the best person is. And for me, I know that I'm leveraging things that people that don't care about race like. I'm a 2-time teacher of the year. That's insane in my district. So that's what I am leveraging so that I can speak about race. Do I know that we need to speak about race? Yeah. Do I know that there are people that don't want to speak about race? Yeah. Do I know that there are people that will never vote for me? Yeah. I'm not talking to those people. I'm talking to those people that I could find points of interest with enough to win, that we have interest convergence. So like, I'll give you an example. People may not care about Black kids. Let's just be real. They may not care that, only 35% of Black students in Round Rock ISD in the 4th grade are reading at, the acceptable level. That may not matter to them, but you know what they care about? Their property taxes. And you know what relates to their property taxes? The rating of our school system. And so when people look up to see if we have an A through F rating and we drop to a B because we haven't closed the gaps, they don't care about Black kids, but they care about that rating. So how can I find that point of interest convergence and that leverage that allows me to speak to what they want and still allows me to speak to what I want and what I need and really what this community needs, but they don't even realize. And so I think that is part of the game, but it's hard because Barack Obama's hands were tied. President Obama's hands were tied in a lot of issues because he was trying to walk such a fine line of being respectable and wanting to make change. And so we have to completely figure out a new formula. Playing safe to these games isn't going to work because they were built to disenfranchise, right? We have to figure out how to really push and speak to the margins.
And yes, Miss Tiffany, I certainly appreciate your mind. So I don't mind being your Taylor Swift if that is what it takes. But I will say that you essentially said what I was going to say in regards to, I just wanted to go back to my friend's point, Mr. Shepard's, about likability. And I don't mean a compromise of who you are, your integrity, your morals, your values for someone to like you. But I think it's how you approach the conversations. Because I've had very starch Republicans who probably, and in Springfield, of course, in local politics, it's a nonpartisan election for the city council. So it's not a Democrat on the ticket or a Republican. But I've had very conservative people invite me in their home to hear about, again, property taxes, which essentially affects them probably the most. And as a drain on their finances. I've had folks who were probably way more liberal than myself invite me in their home and talk about things that were important to them, such as, a woman's right to access, and things of that general nature. The list goes on in terms of issues. So, I think it's the approach that you take to those conversations that can deem you as, someone who is likable, motorcycles in the back, or not likable. So again, it's not, and I think it's something you should also be aware of as someone seeking office. And again, it's not compromising, what your platform is in any way, shape, or form, but it's articulating in a way for those that might not necessarily agree so that they can somewhat see your point or understand where you're coming from. I think, again, that feeds into respectability, with folks being able to respect the position you took based on your own experiences and perspective.
I mean, I think that speaks to that, what Tiffany was saying, that point of interest convergence. And I think really that's what it sounds like, at least to my ears, that everyone is really trying to say, in their own way, is where is that point of interest convergence? Not, do I have to put on the hat, do the song and dance to please you to get the vote, as much as it is, well, we can agree to disagree, but where do we agree so that we can actually work together? Because once you're in the office, you still need the people, correct me if I'm wrong, that help get you in the office to get some of these things that you need done. So I really like Tiffany, you got these quotes, man. You're very quotable. I got to tell you that. If by this time this election is over, you are not in that seat, we're gonna have a problem. But I mean, I say that to say, like, that's really what it sounds like, what I'm hearing from everyone. It's, where does that interest converge? Where do we find our commonality, our common interest? We can agree to disagree on where we're different, but we still got to work together, whether we agree on everything or whether we disagree on everything, if we all want to make this better.
And I think most of us, as a society, agree on most things, right? There's some controversial, like, high, I call them like the low hanging fruit versus the fruit at the top of the tree, right? And what happens is, people get so caught up in really going after the big stuff that they don't spend the time to deal with, like, the everyday stuff that you have in common, right? And I think if we can spend some time and actually focus on the things that we agree on, right? If you will just allow me maybe 45 seconds to give an example. In New York City, we've been having some really intense conversations around equity, right? And there's some people that I've been going back and forth with, like, hardcore over it, right? But one of the things that we all, like, me and one of the people that we oppose each other on, is the fact that kids shouldn't be vaping in schools, right? So we joined forces and really worked toward making sure that the DOE, or Department of Education, had a policy as it relates to kids vaping in schools. And I think it definitely does speak to what Tiffany is saying, is look for the things that we have in common. I think people always start from what makes us different, but if we look for the things that we have in common, you will find that you can get a lot of things done.
Okay. I had to unmute. All right, Vern, you've been kind of quiet. Anything you want to add to this?
Well, no, I was sitting back listening to what everybody was saying, and I agree with the panel. I find it with my predicament that I'm in, is that a lot of people are scared of me because of the simple fact of the party that I belong to, and that you and I've had several conversations in regards to that. But basically, what I've done is for accountability, and also to show people that I do reach across the board, the aisle, and I work together with the two aldermen that are in my district that happen to be Democrats. Work together on a lot of projects. I also had constant contact with the mayor that I did run against last year, with different ideas for what needs to be done in the community. So if you have an open policy, you can probably get things done quicker than you would if it was just me, because you have to have a team behind you. You have to have some folks that are there that are going to believe in what you're trying to do. And like what Marcus was saying, when he did his thing for the chief thing, he had to go and talk to everybody and let them know what was going on, so that when he was going to bring it up in the chambers and speak on it, they knew exactly what he was talking about. He had the stats, he had everything that was there. Even though it failed, it still became. And a lot of times we look at it as failures, but it's not a failure. It's, you know, the approach of where it needs to be at the time. And to allude to what Tom was saying is, you know, I get what he's, as far as what Barack was doing, and did he miss steps, or did we miss this or miss that or whatever. But we also have to realize that we're blacks that are trying to be accepted into a white world that is white justice and white law that was actually written against us. And we're trying to make them accept us and rewrite stuff so that we can sit at the table and we can be a part of what's going on. So the fight is definitely there, and it's not what everybody thinks it is. I just wish there was more things like this, more podcasts like this, more one-on-one where young folks can actually sit down and talk to elected officials and not think that, you know, you're sitting down talking to somebody and they think they're better than you when they're the reason why you're there fighting for them. So, you know, I'm just at all listening to what's going on, because I'm thinking like, this is the only place, Waterbury is the only place that this stuff is happening at. And I'm seeing it's in the Bronx, it's in Springfield, it's in Texas. So it's everywhere, you know.
I'm trying to unmute before Minnie tries to clown me in the chat with my feedback. All right, so I have to ask the next question. Tiffany, really quickly, talk one more time about that district you're running in Texas. If you have a website where people can go on and support you, just talk. I'm a detour from the subject, and just talk about that for a minute. How can people from across the country, and we're on the other side of the country, how can we support you? I know that you said there's about 16 days left, which means you still need that last strong push in terms of resources. You got to pay bills, got to get mailers out, all that stuff. Talk about that.
Absolutely. We're working to raise one more round of mail. So any money is helpful. You can follow my campaign page. It's Tiffany, Tiffanie, the number 4, RRISD. So Round Rock ISD, RRISD. And you can go to my website, which is www.tiffanie, Tiffanie, the number 4, RRISD.com. All of our social media, including our Instagram and our Twitter, follows that convention. You'll know you're there because you'll see my fro. That's part of our branding. And we can definitely use your financial contributions. We've raised pretty well. So what normally happens in my area is people buy their school board seats. So they either have a PAC that's supporting them, or they use their own money, which I don't have, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to put in a campaign. So we've been raising. So anything that you're able to contribute there on my website is greatly appreciated. It will go to getting the word out. We have 76,000 eligible voters in my district. Our seats are at large. So that means that I'm running what is comparable to a congressional race in some places. So it's pretty wild. We're not leaving anything to chance. I definitely have a target on my back for being a Black woman here in the suburbs, number one. But also, like, even, you know, with some of the leadership of my district for running. So I have to win. If I'm going to put myself out here, I have to win. So I would appreciate your financial contribution. If you believe in prayers, I want to offer those. Please send those as well. My campaign has experienced some abuse, even a death threat. So yay us. And we're fighting back. We're standing against that level of hatred. I am here to serve. Yes, I am here to serve all children. We will not be intimidated. We are confident and competent, and we will win, and we will make Round Rock ISD a place that is safe and welcoming to each and every child, not just children, but each and every family. So I'd appreciate your support. www.tiffanie4rrisd. No contribution is too small and no contribution is too large. Our contributions are funneled through a political action committee that is supporting me specifically. And so there's not a limit. So we appreciate your support. And please follow our page so you can see our victory and see how we navigate this. We're just really excited, and I'm honored to be in this position to serve my community. So excited. Thank you for having me here today. This has been really uplifting.
Good. We're happy to have you. Let's see. Alderman, I believe you're also running. You want to talk about the race that you're currently in right now?
Yes, I'm running for state rep for the 72nd district. It's pretty tight. I was able to raise the public funding, so right now I really don't need any money. I just need the support and getting the word out for me to be elected. I have a very good chance of winning this time around. The first time I did run 4 years ago, I was basically my own hype man just to see if I can get my name out there and do whatever. My is Matthews for 72nd on Facebook 2020. Twitter is the real Vern 1, and Instagram and TikTok are also Matthews for 72nd 2020. So, and if you want to get any information or talk to me about anything that's going on, I do have 2 cell phone numbers. 203-528-6152 is my personal. 203-819-1371 is for the campaign and campaign only. I do respond back within 20 to 25 minutes after receiving a phone call. Unlike the counterpart that I'm running against, I believe that's one of the things to be accountable for running and also holding a seat is to be able to connect to the people that have the problems.
Okay. Marcus, you're not running. You're not up until next year. Any plans for hitting that seat again?
Yes, I will be running for re-election.
Okay.
And again, for Springfield's fifth ward, and my Instagram information is councilman_Marcus J. Williams. On Facebook, I am the committee to elect Marcus J. Williams. I don't have a TikTok, so you, Alderman, you beat me to the punch on that one. But yes, I will be and continuing the fight for the city to get funds for the communities that need the most. I currently chair the Maintenance and Development Subcommittee of the city's council that's responsible for holding meetings on the city's infrastructure, things related to the Department of Public Works, and things of that general nature. So again, at the turn of the end of the year, things change with the new president coming in. So again, I will be continuing. With that being said, I appreciate everyone, all the perspectives shared, and I hopefully this will certainly start a new friendship with the folks on the call today, and continuing to support each other, because that's what we certainly need to do a lot more of, and not just on this call, but in general. So I am appreciative of the opportunity to speak to you all and speak to the folks listening.
Okay.
Yep.
So, my term just started in July, right? And it runs for 2 years. So I'm good for right now, right? And whether or not I'm going to do this in 2 years, I haven't really thought about yet, right? I said I will run my race and do this as faithfully, run my race as hard and as fast as I can. And in 2 years, if people want me to do it again, I'll do it again. Great. And if not, guess what? Great. So I actually didn't step into this for that. I'm the first elected parent member in this space. So in many ways, I'm kind of a trailblazer. So it's if I can, set things up in such a way where the person that comes after me can step in and build on the foundation that I laid, great. So I will say, Tiffany, I'm with you. November 3rd, I'm gonna have my TV on, looking at the ticker on the bottom of the screen. I look to see your name there. The last thing I'm gonna say is, for those that want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Tom C. Shepard. So I made it a point to kind of set everything up the same, so it didn't matter which platform you were on, it would be easy to find me. I do again really appreciate being here. So, turn it back over to you, Daryl.
Thank you. All right, Minnie, Hanif, anything you guys want to add? Any questions at this time?
I want to say that what I really appreciate more than anything about this conversation today is, let's look at the diversity that we have on this panel. We have generational diversity, we have diversity of political parties, and yet not one single time did you see someone attacking someone else's opinion. Not one single time did you see someone saying, oh, you belong to this party, what the heck is wrong with you? Not one single time did you see someone just turning their nose up because of an opposite political party. This is the exact thing that we need to see, not just when it comes to running for office, but more importantly, this is what we need to see in our communities every day. It's okay to agree to disagree. It's perfectly fine if we don't agree and we don't all share the exact same thing. But the number one goal that we all share is seeing our communities being better, our communities not being under a system of constant oppression, and our children being able to get something that we don't have so that they can live a better quality of life and have a better opportunity at a future that doesn't see them as a commodity to be used or target practice for overzealous people with trigger fingers. That's the most important thing that I take away from this discussion today. The second most important thing that I want to say about this is that, some of you that are watching, especially some of you that are local to the Springfield and Hartford area, you know good and well that you have the mind, the aptitude, the fortitude, and the will to run for office, and you should. You need to get up. You need to run, because we need people who are willing and able, and we need people who can be in this environment to speak for us. Because if there's no one to speak for us, then guess what? Nothing is going to change for us. And most importantly, for those like similar, Tiffany, you are so quotable. But for those that are just not, if you're not the one that can handle that and you're trying to be the one, I go back to my favorite quote from The Rock: know your role, shut your mouth. Just know your role, play your role, do what you have to do, because this is not an individual game. This is like a team sport. You see the person that's in the environment, but there's a team of people behind that person. So find what your role is in the process and take it.
All right. Minnie, you're up. Any thoughts?
I just want to say that it's always great to connect with people, who aren't local or that you don't necessarily know, because it's kind of like, melanated people when the beat drops. Like when the beat drops, we're not all that different. You watch a video of somebody dancing way across the world and everybody doing the same dance, listening to the same music. It's a great experience, and it should be a unifying experience to know that, Tiffany over in Texas is going through some of the same things as an educator that I go through as an educator. Or that, just the struggle brings us together. We're just one big family. And I think that the sooner that we realize that, the sooner that we can unify the Black family on a national level, on a global level, we can return to our former glory as a people. And I can't wait to see that day, no matter where I am when it happens. But it's always a humbling experience to know that, we're all experiencing the same reality in one form or another, and that we all have a role to play, and that we can all help each other. So Tiffany, them death threats keep coming in, holler at me. I'm the Black Ops member of the team. Like Mr. Shepherd said, we got your back. And I see you, Daryl. No, seriously. And I love y'all, and I love this platform, and thanks for being a guest panelist, and thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing, thanks for commenting. We need these things, and if y'all need anything, holler at me. I'm here.
Do you mind if I say one more thing, Daryl? I promise I'll be like 10, 15 seconds, right? Oh, you just popped up again. Okay.
Here we go. Technical difficulties. My apologies. I want to thank everybody for participating. I think the political process is so important. I think you've all said it 1,000 times today. If we don't get involved and if we don't make this change, the change won't happen. Regardless of how you feel about the political process, we all have to be involved. It's a risk. There's a sacrifice to everything that we do, regardless of whether we run or if we're supporting somebody who is running. I just think everybody needs to be involved in this process. If you have something to contribute, put yourselves in a position to be voted for. Don't hold yourself hostage to any of the existing politicians, regardless of who they are. Stand your ground, know what you're fighting for. The beauty of all this is there are so many, like everyone has said, there's so many similarities. The challenges are pretty similar. The goal, the mission, the aim, similar. And we have to work together and we have to pull this together. Again, I just want to thank everybody. And yeah, this is On Deck. Every day we're being Black in America, and this is our perspective. So I want to say thank you, everybody. Deeply appreciate it.
Wait a minute. Mr. 10 to 15 seconds or something he wanted to add.
Say it again.
Mr. Shepherd wanted to say something.
Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Thanks. You know, all I want to say is, you know, it doesn't matter if you're running for political office or not, right? Like, it's be involved, do something, right? I always think about, like, what are you prepared to do? You know, it's like you can't sit back and complain about the outcome if you are not prepared to do something about it. So I will just invite everybody, just no matter what it is, whether it's running for political office, whether it's picking up a broom and going outside and sweeping your neighborhood, whatever it is, like, be prepared to do something, to step into a space and contribute something to it. So that's the last thing that I wanted to add. Thank you so much again for having me.
All right, Tom, now that you destroyed my clothes, I'm okay with it. I'm going to open it to everybody. Anybody else have any last thoughts that they want to get off their chest? I'm going to go from top to bottom on my screen. Marcus, you're up.
Thank you, Daryl. And I, again, appreciative of you having this podcast, especially right before an election. But I will share that, you know, I often hear that there is one Black experience. And I just like to walk that back and think of it more as many Black perspectives, which make one complete Black perspective, instead of it just being one that we all share. So I just am, again, appreciative and in awe of your backgrounds, your perspectives, your many talents that you're bringing to the forefront. And I wish all of you with upcoming elections the best of luck. I know God will be on your side either way. And yeah, again, I'd love to join at some other point, Daryl, on a future podcast as well. So appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Marcus. Council Williams. Minnie Jones, closing thoughts.
I learned a lot. Like most weeks, I always come here with an open mind, knowing that I don't have all the answers and I shouldn't have to have all the answers. But I appreciate the knowledge that is brought forth through this platform. It's always very humbling. I'm always very grateful for it. So I appreciate you all for, you know, continuing my journey as a student of life. So thank you.
Vern, my man, closing thoughts.
I want to say thank you for having this platform and having such a great panel of guests on today. It is 16 days apart. Tiffany, all the luck to you. God's with you and you got this. I know he's with me and I got this. You know, Tom, you're thinking about maybe not doing it, but I see the passion that you have. You're definitely going to be there. And Brother Williams, you sit just like I sit, writing for a city. If you need me, I'll come up there. I don't see party. I don't see any of that stuff. I see a Black man that's trying to do right by his community, just like I am. And Tom, I'm right around the corner from you. I'm less than an hour away, and it can give me a chance to go see the Baltimore Orioles when they beat the Bronx Bombers. So I'll definitely come through and help you out as well.
All right, thank you. You back up again, Tiffany. Any quotables?
Oh, let's see what I can dig deep for. Just kidding. I wanted to say thank you for having me here today. This has been incredible, not just to like share, but to learn and to feel that I am in a space and sharing space with people who understand the journey and who have triumphed. And so I'm so grateful. I really want to give a shout out to just one of my heroes in life. It's actually one of my friends. Her name's Jaquita Wilson Kirby, and you will be hearing her name and you will be seeing her in DC. I don't know what she'll be doing, but she'll be there. I wish she would be president. She is one of the most incredible human beings. She is a Black woman. She's actually from Jersey, down here in Texas, looking at us crazy for all the things that we do that are weird to her. And I've never seen somebody show up in their full humanity so much. And I'm just so grateful for her because she's the one that's led me through this political process. If you're thinking that you want to do this, you don't have to do it alone. There are people that have come before you. And I know I'm happy to talk about my experience with anyone that's considering this. And I'm taking away from today, Minnie, your question about, how can I get my bag and be a politician? And I'm just taking away, like, I feel like just being and sharing the space with you, your spirit is so remarkable. And so even if you don't feel compelled to vote, or if you're kind of like, how is this process going to help me? You're not exempt from engaging in the collective, because I can already tell like you have so much value to add. And maybe it's like the teacher in me that is like drawn to that and you specifically. But there are so many people out here, like none of us are exempt. Only some of us will run for office, and that's okay. You gotta be prepared to take that abuse. And I hope that we will all plug in a way that is meaningful in this coalition that we're building as we move through this work together. So I'm grateful. I was really inspired by all who participated today. Thank you to my friend Tom for putting me on in this. It's incredible and heartening. And this is just what I needed 16 days before this election. My word. Thank you.
Hanif, you can close us off. Since Minnie stopped me, go for it.
What I want to say before we close out the show is, like I said before, if nothing else, I'm going to repeat this. If nothing else, look at the diversity of people on this panel today. Look at how civil the engagement was. And look at how, even though we're coming from different parts of the country, how we're able to work together, learn some things from one another, and be able to propel ourselves and all of our commonalities and differences moving forward to what we need to do. This is what we need for our community all day, every day, in the variety of issues that we faced. For those people that are running for office, do the work you have to do. For those people that are thinking about running for office, get your team together. For those people that are saying they shouldn't be running for office, but really should be, Minnie Jones, they need to get themselves, their team, understand how this process works, and get out there. We need you. We need your voice. We need your perspective, and we need what you have. That would be my closing thoughts. And, I would say for everyone else listening, you know how we are. This is On Deck. Raw, unfiltered, and as Tom has said, we normally have another panelist here who says what Tom says all the time about being unapologetic. We are unapologetic in what we're saying, but we also are saying what we're saying out of love for our community and wanting us to be better. So with that in mind, like every other discussion we have, which seems to be the common theme, there needs to be a part 2 on this particular theme, and a part 3 and a part 4. And I hope that when we have those additional parts, that all of our guest panelists would be willing to come back, because we need to hear from you. We need to see what's going on. And this is perfect show for this day, for this time. And, with that, I'm done. I really enjoyed this today.
All right. Well, good night, everybody. We'll see you next Sunday. This is On Deck, Being Black in America. Peace.
Brothers, listen to me. God's walked in.